morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Pero aguantan mucho, no sé por qué.
Good. Hey.
Y el pobre estaba fatal.
Hello.
Hello, dice.
Let's try to start. I guess you know that in Spain we always are late, but let's try to be on time. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. We are very pleased to have you here. Welcome to the National Museum of Natural Sciences. The National Museum of Natural Sciences belongs to the National Research Council, the CSIC, and I have the pleasure to have here the president of the CSIC that has come to give brief words of welcome, and then she has to leave because she has a pretty tight schedule and agenda, and well, I just leave the floor to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Gracias, Director del Museo Nacional de Ciencias Naturales del CSIC de España. And thanks a la Fundación BBVA. And thanks to all directors of the most important natural science museum from Europe, London, Paris, Brussels, Berlin, Leiden, Vienna, Stockholm, and Copenhagen, and the United States, Washington, New York, and Harvard. Welcome to this celebration. Today we commemorate the 250th anniversary of the Museo Nacional de Ciencias Naturales del CSIC. The role of museum as center of research and dissemination of knowledge in the face of the natural and also human crisis, such as climate change, will be analyzed. Through conferences and roundtable, discussion will be held on how to strengthen international collaboration and how to unify all the collection in an internet portal. You have a busy day ahead. I leave with you with your work. Good joy, enjoy Madrid, and thank you very much.
I'm ready here, yes. Okay, so now, if I'm correct with the program, I have to talk for 1 hour. I will try to talk less than 1 hour, but let's see. Because I have to kind of explain the history of the museum, which is 250 years. So I will try to summarize it, but still, that takes a while to explain some details of some. And then I will come to the present of today, what we are doing these days, our structure and functioning, and then a glimpse of some perspectives that will connect to what we are here for, to talk and debate about what we are up to. So let's go straight to the talk. So basically, the museum 250 years ago starts in the middle of the Enlightenment. So this was a movement that was spreading throughout Europe, and of course Spain was not out of this movement. You can see here some examples of some examples of curiosity cabinets in Denmark, the famous one of Ole Worm, or James Cook going from England to Australia, the French encyclopedia. Or there in German, the philosopher Kant having dinners and talking with their table companions, which is what they were doing, eating and discussing, which is always fun. So here, what was going on here? Here we have a brilliant guy, Antonio de Ulloa, with only 19 years old, participating in an expedition with La Condamine, Bourguer, and Godin, the French, and with Jorge Juan from Spain. And they went to measure the length of the equator, the degree of latitude near the equator. When he returned, well, he was captured by the British, and then they found that he was a famous scientist, and they make him a member of the Royal Society right away. And then he returned, so it was good that he was captured by the British at that moment. So he came back to Spain, and the king at that time decided that he will be commissioned to found and run a first cabinet, which was called the Royal House of Geography and Cabinet of Natural History. But this cabinet, which, well, you see there, it was more oriented to commercial and economical values than other thing. It ran from 1752 to 1766 and stopped because of different political issues around the king. So this was precedent of our first real cabinet, which is the one we are commemorating now, which comes later. This was founded in October 17th, 1771. So we've already passed 1 year of celebrations of the 250. We are 250 plus 1 week. Plus 1 year and 1 week. But that's the pandemic, I guess. and how it works, how does work? King Charles III, not the one in England, the one our King Charles III, asked this guy, Pedro Franco Dávila, who was a rich businessman in Paris, that he came from Guayaquil, now Ecuador. He had already gathered a nice collection of natural curiosities. And he asked him if he will be willing to either lend the collection or Chester will buy that collection. And you see to your right, that's the letter. We have it in our archives, where was sent to Pedro Franco Dávila from the king, well, from Marquis, saying that the king has agreed with the idea of Pedro Franco, and we will get the collection of Pedro Franco Dávila, and he will be the first director. Which that was one thing that he said. I lend my collection, but I have to be the first director of the cabinet. And these are, so there you have the catalog of all the curiosities he had. He published a catalog of all the curiosities he had. And from that time, I show here some of the pieces that we still have, some of the objects that are still, some are in the exhibition. Well, most are in the exhibition, actually, except the Bezoar, which is in my office. Just to remind me of the old cabinet. And apart from the collection coming from Pedro Franco Dávila, the king was receiving many presents and gifts from exotic places. And here's, for example, the case of an Indian elephant that was sent from Manila in 1773. And the guy died 4 years later. And then it was dissected by Juan Bautista Bru, which was the taxidermist of the cabinet. And also is the one that made these two paintings that you have there. And then you see the actual specimen in our exhibition. This is still there. This giant anteater was also a gift to the king. The poor guy only lived 7 months. It was not like the elephant. The problem was that they didn't have enough ants to eat for the anteater, so it died. They tried other kinds of food, but it died at the end. And again, it was dissected and went to the royal cabinet. We don't have the specimen anymore; it was lost during the years. But we have the drawings of the original drawings of the specimen, and then one to the right is it's a tribute to Goya. So part of the scene behind the animal was supposedly painted by Goya in his very early years when he just arrived in Madrid. And we have that. That one is in the exhibition, that portrait. And then we have one of our jewels, is this giant ground sloth, the Megatherium, which was brought from Buenos Aires, well, near Buenos Aires, and from the Luján River in 1788. And it was one of the first complete vertebrate fossils that was exhibited in a museum, in Europe at least. Well, in Europe, which was the center of the world at that time, so everywhere. And the important thing is that Juan Bautista Bru made some drawings about it and were sent to Georges Cuvier, who described the species without seeing it, without seeing the bones, actually, only from the drawings. And it's in the other, well, it's here in the exhibition also. Another interesting specimen from that time is this one that from Felix de Azara. Felix de Azara was for many years in Argentina and Paraguay, all over the South America. And when Darwin went there in the trip of the Beagle, he had read the books of Felix de Azara to know more or less where to go. So we have this giant armadillo that was not sent directly to the cabinet, but to a minister of Charles IV, Manuel Godoy, and he readily didn't know what to do with that specimen and said, well, let's get it to the cabinet. Get out from my house, this thing. And came to the cabinet, which was, we were lucky. And then apart from the specimens, we have this nice, the Van Bergen collection, which is a collection of drawings and engravings from this guy that, I don't know why it's, if you can get rid of this anyway. Apparently not. Anyway, so these are 90,000 artworks. We have still 4,000. The remains are in Spain, but in the Royal Botanical Garden, many of them. And these are drawings about animals, because the idea of Van Bergen was to have drawings of all the known animals in the world. He never ended having all, but anyway. We have a nice collection of old paintings, including this famous rhino of Durero. And we have also this nice Cuadro del Reino del Perú, which was painted in 1799 and describes 32 portraits of Creoles, well-dressed, of natives, not that well-dressed, naked, basically. And then we have in all these little portraits, we have the animal and a plant, each one different. So they describe in total 194 animals and 148 plants. So it's kind of, you can spend a lot of time looking at this picture in the exhibition. So the Royal Cabinet, the original Royal Cabinet of Natural History was not here. Was in the very center of Madrid, near Puerta del Sol, in the Calle Alcalá, and in what is called the Goyeneche Palace. It was in the second floor. It was, there were all the things there. And it was open to the, this is an important thing of this Natural History Cabinet, is that it was open, the King Charles III explicitly said that the cabinet has to be open to the public. Normally the cabinets were for the aristocracy or for researchers only, but here the king said, no, we need to have this open to the public. And that happened in 1776. So 5 years later than the creation of the cabinet. And well, you see here, this is the building that is still there. And here is, this is my office. That you are, directors, you are welcome to come and see it and have a picture over there all together. And this, the furniture is original from that early cabinet. So, and the rest is a reconstruction, obviously. So the collections were growing very fast at that time. So because the king was already said that all the provinces in South America, Philippines, other places should bring natural curiosities to the cabinet. So it was growing so fast that the king decided to make a larger building, and he asked Juan de Villanueva to make it. And you see there, the idea was to be, this is the gate of the Royal Botanical Garden, and the idea that this is the building, and the idea that was that this building, which is this, will be the new Royal Cabinet of Natural History. But then, in between that, when the building was constructed, we had the Spanish War of Independence from 1802 to 1814. And at that time, We have, for example, the dolphin's treasure that was plundered by the French troops in 1813, and other things. Just this is a relation of all the things that got out from the museum, from the cabinet, and went to France. Then they were restored back, but when they restored them, they went readily to the Prado Museum in 1839, because the building that was supposed to be for the Natural History Museum became the Prado National Museum. So we lost there our opportunity to have a nice building. That was the first time we lost. We have lost several opportunities during our history. So then, during the 19th century, well, I have summarized here several of the things that happened over there. Mostly, basically, at some point, all the royal cabinets, the royal cabinet, royal laboratories, the observatory, and so on, were merged under a single institution. The museum was ascribed at some point to the Central University of Madrid, but then some of the belongings of the museum were moved to the recently created National Archaeological Museum, which is there in the center. Then, at some point, the Spanish Royal Society of Natural History, and we have the president somewhere here, the actual president, was established and closely connected to the museum, and it was the one already introducing the ideas of Darwin into Spain. We started a connection with the marine biology station in Santander, so we send students over there, and that marine biology station at some point became part of the museum also, very early. Then it was visited by Prince Albert I of Monaco, and ended being in a different institution, the National Institution of Oceanography, not anymore related to the museum. And again, there were another part of what we have, the anthropological pieces, were moved to the Anthropological Museum. We have here also the director of the, today in the audience, the director of the Anthropological Museum. And in this picture, you see one of the most important director during these years, which was Mariano de la Paz Graels, with the students. These people that look so serious are students in reality. And I show you here this butterfly, because this butterfly was identified for the first time, described by Mariano de la Paz Graels. After was named Graelsia isabelli. It's not that he put his name to the species. And it was named after the queen, Isabel II. So he wanted to be in good relation with the queen. But the most important, perhaps the most interesting thing that happened in the museum during the 19th century was this Pacific Scientific Commission. So we sent, these guys were sent to go here to make this round trip around all South America, and also they went up to California and Costa Rica. And one important thing about this commission is that this guy here was a photographer in 1816-something. So we have pictures. I will show you now a few pictures of that time. They are the very earliest pictures, photos of America. The Pacific Scientific Commission brought almost 80,000 specimen objects. They started with with money and everything, but they ended without money. And here is a page of the book of Luis Agassiz, a journey in Brazil. He said that that Luis met. He has his own expedition coming from Harvard, and he in Tabatinga, in the upper Amazon. Found our expedition. And our expedition, as he says here, is they have lost almost all their clothing, except what they wore. So basically, that's what that's what they found. This has happened always for us, to the Spanish. We start with a lot of money, and we end without clothes, mostly. But bringing back, as he says there, but he says, fortunately, their papers and collections were saved. That was the important thing. Anyway, As I said, there was a photographer, so we have now very early photos of that time, and here is a picture of that I saw with Alexander, and he recognized that is the old Natural History Museum in Rio, and you can have here, it doesn't say it's below, but this is Valparaíso in Chile, the Bay of Valparaíso, and this is San Francisco, across of Washington Street with some other street that there is not anymore named like that. So by the end of that century, we were still in Alcalá, in the Palacio Goyeneche, and at some point, the government said to the museum, you have to pack everything, 48 hours, and you have to leave the building. And that was the case. We left, and we ended here. This is the National Library building. We ended in this corner, which is this corner here. And we ended there, but because everything was moved so fast in 48 hours, for many time, everything was just put there in boxes, and there was no exhibition, nothing like that. Finally, during these years, they were able to have some exhibitions, and this is the only photograph we have from that period. It was a magazine that they went there and they made some pictures, and this is how the museum looked in the National Library building. And then, so the problem was we didn't have a building. We had much of our collections in boxes, and the situation was really bad. And this guy, Ignacio Bolívar Urrutia, was named in 1901 director of the museum. He was named director, and as you can see from what you can see, and as you can see here, he was an important guy. He was a well-recognized scientist and got many important positions in Spain, and has enough power, or at least was able to speak directly to the king, to Alfonso XIII. And he finally got the possibility of moving the museum to this building, the building we are here today. And this building was made for an exhibition. It was an exhibition palace, and then it was emptied, and then we went in, but we share from then on, since 1907, we share the building with the Higher School of Industrial Engineers. And there's always this tension on who is the one that has to get out from the building. That we never ended. No, we are still here, so I don't think no one will leave the building. At that time, so there was we were able to go to the museum, to a new place. The collections and research restarted. You have all these people that were in charge of what they call sections, which are basically different collections of the museum. You can see that at that time there were still no women doing or not being head of research, but that was the case. And each one make we started what is called the Works of the National Museum of Natural Sciences, and they were publishing in that magazine, they were publishing basically summaries of all the collections, inventories of all the collections we have. And then all other things like, for example, you see here, the coleopterans from Morocco, or other expedition things that we were doing. We also, at that time, we make the Ventorrillo Alpine Biological Station, which is here near Madrid in the Guadarrama mountains. And here you see an old picture. There was in 1935 International Congress of Entomology, and one of the things the entomologists did was visiting the mountains, and they have a nice day over there. And you can see that the building is still the same today, and we are using it as a station for ecology of the mountains, which is now very nice. Well, it's very nice because we can follow there the climate change. It's not that nice that we have climate change, but it's good that we have that station. So in these years, the early 20th century, we have these two brothers, José María and Luis Benito, that make these are the two brothers here, and they make these nice displays that were famous all over Europe because they were very detailed. And if you have the chance, they are in the exhibition, and you can see that how detailed they were, because they went out to the nature to see exactly how the birds or the mammals were living and behaving, and then they tried to make this this place as closer as possible as what they have saw in really in nature. And here you see a picture, which is, this is the two kings, the King of Spain and the King of England, because this is a natural history museum. And this was a present from one king to the other of one of these displays of Benedictos that is now in the NHM in England, in London. And probably one of the things that happened there with the Benedicto pieces was this, that they mount this elephant. It was so big, and that it was handled by the Duque de Alba, and it was so big that they couldn't mount it here. So they had to mount it in the Botanical Garden, and when it was done, it crossed the whole, the main street in Madrid, the Paseo La Castellana. It crossed all over like this, and you have the picture. So obviously, all Madrid was there looking at the elephant moving around the city. In 1930 was that. At that time, also in 1912, it was created the Commission of Paleontological and Prehistorical Researches. It was led by the Marquis of Cerralbo, and basically they went to all the caves around the peninsula, Spain basically, in the north, in the northern shore and in the Mediterranean region. And they were putting with tracing papers and color sheets, they were getting all the paintings that were in the walls of the caves. And some of these paintings are now, these tracing papers and color sheets are the only thing we know from those paintings, because they have disappeared in the original caves. And as you can see here, I mean, it's not the typical, some are the typical drawings of animals, but then there are more abstract, more slender figures. So the variety of paintings in this case is very high. We got through a replica of the dinosaur from the Carnegie Museum. This was already several of the museums had it, London and Berlin, and Bolivar asked our King Alfonso to ask Mr. Carnegie to get one copy, and finally we got it. And here you see, well, these are the curators. So this is the curator of mammals, the curator of ichthyology, and this is the mother of the queen in the opening of the visit to the dinosaur. And then, so at that time we were kind of returning to have international visibility, gaining, doing research, having increasing our collections, and there were people coming around. Like here you see Einstein, and where we have taken the picture, I think this is, or I'm not sure which of the two, I think it's this one. So here is Einstein, and this is where we were having the picture. Ramonica Hall was here, our Nobel Prize, so we have an exhibition on Ramonica Hall, was nearby and moving around. I will show you later that John S.B. Haldane was around these days. And here you see also, this is one of the typical fences from the museum, and you see Dali and Lorca that were nearby in the students' residence and used to walk around, which, by the way, I should say the grandfather of Gonzalo was also in the students' residence at that time. He told me that, and I just want to mention. But then came the Civil War. Again, when we were on our high peak, everything went down. And what happened there here is, as I told you, this is a letter in Nature of 1937 that is John B.S. Haldane referring that he's with his friend Zulueta. Zulueta was a geneticist here in Madrid that has discovered that chromosome Y is inherited, the genes, that chromosome Y has genes basically, and they are inherited. And he says here that they were here, and suddenly there was an air raid, and he says, considerably more severe than any one of those on London in 1914, 1918. However, no bomb fell. No bombs fell, but the authorities decided to move many of our displays to the Prado Museum to make them safer there. So here, this is picture when the end of the Civil War, they opened the museum, the Prado Museum, and these are our Benedicto brothers displays that were, and he says, this is how was the museum when we get into Madrid, and you can see that at that time everything was safe. So there comes the post-war, and the first thing, we have this guy, a priest, that was this guy was the curator of minerals, but also a priest. And he was in charge, briefly, as director of the museum, and his function was to try to purge, basically, the people that had been before, because they were associated to the Republic and not to the new government. So many had to go to the exile. And then, as you can see here, again, the museum, and this is a Civil War barracks, so those were times, again, that we were going down. And as you see here, this is here, exactly here, it's a picture of here. And this thing is there, so it's still there. And what we don't have anymore is the portrait of Franco, or this big cross with Jesus Christ. But nothing happened much more during the next years. At that time, as I said, the National Research Council in 1939, just after the war, it was created. We were part of the National Research Council. You see here, this is Franciscus Franco created the blah, blah, blah. And then one of the bad things they did, the authorities, was to split the museum into three different institutes. One for zoology, the José de Acosta, one for entomology, and one, the Lucas Mayada, for geology. And this continued during the 40 years of mandate of Franco. And this was going down. They didn't really take care of us for 40 years, basically. The thing was really bad. And the final, let's say, at the end, in 1973, there was a visit of Prince Akihito that time. He was not yet Emperor of Japan. He did a private visit, and suddenly he said to the authorities, "Oh, I would like to see." He's an expert on gobies, and as his father was on ocean, on marine spiders. And he said, "Oh, I would very much like to see the Natural History Museum," and nobody was prepared for that. So they came. It was one of these not announced visits, and well, they tried to do their best, but at that time it was so bad, the visit. I mean, he asked for, "Oh, my father used to lend some specimens here. Where are they? I would like to see them." Nobody knew where they were. It was so horrible. Not even in the press, nobody said that he had been here, because they were a little bit ashamed. And by 1976, chronicles refer that we had one director, one administrator, one archivist, 5 assistants, 6 cleaners, and 5 laborers, and that was it. No researchers, no collection managers, no curators. And actually, the first permanent research position was opened in 1978. Already Franco was already dead. And the first collection manager was hired in 1984. So we are getting closer to present, as you can see. And yes, then in 1985, first Emiliano Aguirre, which was a famous paleontologist, has recently died, and was famous because he started the Atapuerca finding hominid fossils in Atapuerca. And then Per Albert, which was famous for this paper, Size and Shaping Ontogeny and Phylogeny, and he was in Berkeley. He was convinced to come and start a new, try to start again with research and collections and make this museum again a museum. So with this, I end more or less the history. 10 minutes. The present is a little bit more dull, so I'm going to go skip this fast. The present is that we belong, as I said, to the National Research Council, which has 121 research centers. And you have the figures there, a lot of researchers, employees. It moves 800 million euros per year, and produce all these publications and PhD theses and so on. And this is the mission. The mission is generating of knowledge, transfer of research results, expert advice, training, society, outreach to the society, manage of large infrastructures, and represent Spain in international bodies. And basically, these are exactly our mission as Natural Science Museum, but only constrained to natural sciences, obviously. So because we are basically a research institute belonging to the National Research Council, everything goes around research. So we have scientific collections, which are, we do research in scientific collections, and our specimens in scientific collections are useful for doing research. Laboratories for doing research. The collections are useful for exhibitions. Research is also displaying exhibitions. We have publications and courses for research, and then outreach and education. This is boring, basically just to say that we have a structure. We are not totally random. So we have many collections. We have many laboratories. And then we have 6 departments, of research departments. And I go very briefly through these departments. Basically, this is one, paleobiology, that has these main research lines: paleobiodiversity, biostratigraphy, taphonomy, human evolution, geometric morphometrics, virtual morphology, basically. And here you see some of the places we are working. This is in Madrid, the Cerro Batallones, which is a late Miocene place with a lot of mammals that went down into a cave, and they were preserved over there, nicely preserved. This is Atapuerca, as I mentioned, the earlier minutes. And here is El Cidrón, which is a cave for Neanderthals. And part of these remains have been used for all these sequencing projects that Svante Pau got the Nobel Prize recently. So they use bones from this Lagerstätte. Geology works in basically in climate change, and on the effects of climate change, of accelerating all natural hazards and so on. Has a mineralogy section. We have meteorites, and one interesting thing that I mentioned here is cave heritage. This is Altamira. You can see here the famous paintings in the wall, and this work was done just to know exactly how the deterioration of these paintings, how fast was going, and we have to stop the. Based on our report, it was not everybody could come anymore to Altamira, but they have to go in blocks of groups that have to reserve in advance. And well, this is other meteorites, or this is paleofluids, studying paleofluids and so on. Evolution ecology has all these research lines: sexual selection, reproductive strategies, animals living in extreme environments means penguins living in Antarctica. Ecology and evolution of parasitoids, conservation biology, urban ecology, which is now very trendy. And basically, most of them work with birds. I will prefer that they will be working on more. There's behavior beyond birds, but they like to work on birds. That's my particular bias. This is the department I belong to, so that's why I have many more lines. I have more pictures, more research lines, and so on. I'm very proud of it. Biodiversity and evolution, and also it's bigger than the others. It's half of the staff, the research staff. So we do taxonomy identification, phylogenies, population genetics, comparative genomics and transcriptomics, and so on. And well, this is a private thing. This is one genome that I did myself in my group. So this is, I have to also say something about my own research that I used to do, not anymore. And I think this is the last one, the biogeochemistry and microbial ecology department, which does microbial ecology in extreme environments. Again, they work on heritage preservation, organic chemistry of organic matter, and biochemistry of ecosystems. Here you can see covers in Antarctica or the Atacama Desert, and here this is the recently restored Portico of Glory in the Santiago Compostela Cathedral, which is really nice, well painted now. And here you can see that they were finding fungi and cyanobacteria and so on before the cleaning. No, there's one more. Biogeography and global change. And this works obviously the most trendy topic now, which is the effects of global change in the distributions of species, and where the physiology of these species will be able to let them adapt to the new conditions and so on. That's macroecology and community ecology, and the study effects of global change. And here you see some of the examples of what they are doing. This is just to say that we like to get out from here a lot, and we do field trips everywhere and for any group. We don't do large expeditions altogether, but each of the expeditions is funded by different research projects that we get from the ministry in competition. And then we come to the exhibitions. The exhibitions, as I said before, we share the building with the engineers. So here in gray, you have the engineers, and in red, what we have really as a museum. And it's not 50-50, we have 40-something, and they have 60-something. 64 says there, we are not sure. But they have more than us of the building. And you can see also that they have the center of the building, so we have split our museum in two wings that are unconnected, so we need to get people, the visitors have to get out from one of the wings to get into the other wing, which is always a source of problems. And these are the two main entrances. You've been here. I hope we have the lunch in this other part, in this other wing. And in total, we have around 4,000 square meters for exhibitions, which is not that much, I should say. And because of that, that constrains the number of visitors we can have. Basically, we have 300,000 visitors, well, more than 300,000 visitors, 350, something like that. But we could have many more if we have more space. That's the main constraint we have. And also that constraint means that we have a highly packed permanent exhibitions. We put as many specimens as we can. You can almost not move. And we will prefer not to have that many, but we try to use as much space as possible. We have 2-3 temporary exhibitions per year, no more. Again, because we don't have a space for more. And then these exhibitions are already thought in the very beginning, designed in the very beginning, so they can become traveling exhibitions throughout different places in Spain. We are also very proud of this, that we are not only having the regular visitors, but we try to encourage the visiting of blind people, deaf people, people with kids with young people with autism spectrum disorder, intellectual disability, and so on. The more we can, the more visitors we can have, the more young people that we can educate in science and respect to nature. We are very proud about that. And we have many museum activities here, as someone was mentioning, or we were talking about night at the museum, so they can sleep here during the night and try to see whether everything moves as in the Smithsonian. But we don't have the budget to make everything moving around during the night. And then have a summer camp and so on. This is the day of International Day of Women and Girls in Science, that in this case was with the Society of Molecular Biology, Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. The Darwin Day, we have always a nice dinner to celebrate Darwin Day. And that's the present. So where we are up to, and that's kind of to introduce what we are here to this 2 days and a half. So these are two posters from the last 2 years of the ICOM. And here are kind of the mottos of the two posters: the future of museums, recover and reimagine. This was because of the pandemic, but in general, we need to reimagine in general. It's not recover, but reimagine. And then, this was kind of, we are weak, but we have a lot of potential power, or we have power of the museum. So basically, this is here. So where we are up to go. It says here, we are encouraged to create, imagine, and share new practices of co-creation of value in its business models for cultural institutions. This is general. It's not only natural history museums. This is any museum. And innovate solutions for the social and environmental challenges of the present. Museums are strategic partners in the implementation of the UN goals, developmental goals. Digital innovation can make museums more accessible and engaging. Or through our research collection and educational programs, we can contribute to shape and inform and engage civil society, and we are essential for community building. which I think this, as I said, these are general statements for any museum, but I think they apply perfectly here. And then we have to decide also, I put here this, I don't know what adjective put to this. This is the Museum of the Future, but I think we are, at least natural history museums, we are more up to this thing, the Cal Academy building, something that is sustainable and well, what the visitors can readily see what is, how we have to behave in the future if we want to continue in this planet. And yes, the most important thing that we are facing now is the environmental crisis. This is one of the topics of one of the sessions, of one of the round tables. And there are so many things going on, all caused by us and all interconnected, that yes, and we have a role here in the sense that we have all our collections that come from centuries, and we can go back and see how things were before we were becoming a global pest. So there is a role for us there, and I think we will discuss this today. The international dimension also, networking is important. I think it's not important, it's mandatory, I will say, now. So here we have CETAF since 1996. It started very, initially was a little bit, first steps, but we have steadily grow and grow. I think we are now kind of a nice network and consortium that can really influence European policy on museums and in general on research related to natural sciences. These are some of the products of CETAF, and the museum, as part of CETAF, we are involved in the Distributed European School of Taxonomy. Synthesis, since 2005, a very nice, successful program that has been able to move scientists from one museum to another or to universities. We have an European Journal Taxonomy and is now, as far as they tell me, is the highest in the rank of the taxonomy section, or whatever is that called in citation index. And why we need to network? Because these days the way to tackle the environmental problems, the biodiversity loss, is big data, is the data science and data analytics. We need to manage a lot of data, and this data requires networking. And here I put some examples of that. There is big data in collections. We are trying through DiSSCo to connect all the collection data, and including collection data and metadata and virtual images into a single unified collection that can be accessible through one single portal, and that's our goal and dream. Same thing with the genomes. This is the European Reference Genome Atlas, or the Earth BioGenome project, which basically the goal is in a couple of decades to sequence all the genomes at chromosome level and then this will be a powerful data set to make new inference about how speciation works or how a species adapt to climate change. And then also ecological data. Basically, this is all these are satellite networks that produce all the data that is captured by satellites, which are specialized in different types of data, like vegetable cover or other things. They also are generating a lot of data that needs to be connected and then used by researchers. So I think that's I put this as perspective, but it's the present already. Exhibitions, there's all these new realities, immersive virtual reality, augmented reality, metaverse, whatever that means. This is too far away. and yes, basically I see here that there are many ways of improving we particularly, I'm claiming that I don't have that much exhibition space. We will have to take care of, have this virtuality in our exhibitions. At least we can enlarge our space virtually. The ideal solution will be that politicians tell us, no, let's have a nice building, but while that happens, we have these possibilities, these technological possibilities. Online exhibits, during the pandemic, with Google Arts and Culture, we were able to make 3D visits to all the exhibitions, and that was nice. Social media, basically, we are in all what you have to be supposed to be, Instagram, Twitter, and so on. We have a blog and so on. But here, what I say here is the main challenge. Well, it's there, no? Yeah. The main challenge is we have a gap. We have kids because parents many times don't know what to do with the kids, so they come here, and they are well educated. Then we have parents that have to come because they have kids, and they remember that when they were kids, they were here. But in between, there is a gap. The young people. The young people like to be connected in their rooms and not get out from there. I have teenagers, so I know very well what I'm talking about. And it's difficult to get in their rooms, even if they are very dirty. And what we need to get them out from the rooms, get them from the houses, and attract them to come to see things here. And that's, I guess, through social media, through all these exhibits that I mentioned before, with different realities, is the way to go. So, well, this is I would say, the picture of dreams and things like that. This is not funded, nothing at all. It's just what you see. This is the back of the museum, and this is what we have asked some architects to design, just in case someone wants to give us money. If someone is not here, but if someone is here on streaming, we are glad to receive money for doing these things. We would like to have this in the back. We would like to change the whole thing inside the main building, in our part, not the engineer's part, or also the engineer's part, if possible. And basically, we want to, the icon was in August. Well, they got together and they come across with a new definition of what is a museum. Basically, this definition, where they took the time to make it rather thorough, perfectly fits what we expect from our museum to be in the next years. And saying that, I think I'm done. Yes, I acknowledge and I thank the Fundación BBVA and our government through the National Research Council that pays our salaries. And of course, I thank all the staff, more than 100 people that every day work in the museum and make possible that this museum opens to the public. So thank you. I think it's you, no? As far as I know now, goes Alexander, I think, no? So I introduce Alexander. Alexander is the director of the National Museum of Brazil in Rio. And let me see. And I think his talk was somewhere here. Yes. Is this one, no? There you are.
See ourselves also starting with a lot of clothes and ending with specimens at least, as you just showed. But I also would like to congratulate everyone for being here today. It's very important to show support for natural history museums like the one that Rafael is heading, because to have institutions in this area over 250 years, 251 as I just noticed today, it's very important. So Rafael, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you everyone for being here today in order to show the support for Rafael. And talking about support, as you all know, we have heard one of our biggest tragedies that you can imagine in any museum, which happened on September 2nd, 2018. Yes, things were not very good for the museum for some for quite some time. And although, despite the efforts, and here I can feel the same way as other directors from other museums, to call the attention of the dangers, we were not able really to succeed. But after such a tragedy, the first thing we got was support. Support from some of you that are here in the room and from the several other places that are working in this area. And for support, this is very important for this international getting together, networking, and being able to do things differently. Now, that wasn't my slide, but what is left when such a tragedy happened? What would you do if you would be stepping in my shoes? Well, we now have a fantastic opportunity, one we did not want to, but now we are able to rebuild the largest museum in South America in a very collective way, in a different way like it was. Keeping a little bit of the history of the country, because the Natural History Museum building was the house of the emperors of Brazil, we had two, but also modernizing it, having a different way to dialogue with society, having a different way of exposing, of showing natural history and anthropology to the visitors. And I could actually stop my presentation with that slide. Come on, guys. It's a winning project. It is going to happen. Look at that environment. We are situated in a park of 550 square meters. We receive thousands of people every day, and on the weekend, a lot. We will be a museum of success. But now, what does success mean? Number of visitors or quality of what we tell them? Quality of what they are able to get in our institution. And for that quality, it's up to us to do it. It's really up to international collaboration that might be able to do something different in one of very important part of the world, which is South America. Now, this is why we had this project, Museu Nacional Lives, which, and I will not bother you with the details of that, but it's very important to show you that we have now different committees, and our purpose is not only for the reconstruction, but to create trust nationally and internationally, to be very open, to be very visible. So we have the executive committee that makes the decisions. We also have an institutional committee, which I will tell you a little bit further. And we also have a grouping work that is thinking the museum after the inauguration, after all the important people there cutting the rope, after how are we going to sustain an important museum like ours. And talking about the institutional committee, as you can see, we do have several from Brazil, the Brazilian Academy of Sciences, the Society of Progress of Science in Brazil. We also have UNESCO, our partners from right from the beginning. We have the Freie University, and also some international institutions, like, for example, the government of Germany, Goethe Institute, Instituto Camões, Portugal government, Austrian government, and guess what? There is room for more. And just to show you who are actually financing all of this, I mean, as I pointed out, UNESCO is very important for us. Instituto Cultural Vale, who has made a lot of things very possible. We have the bank BNDES, we have Bradesco, and a few others. So one way or another, it is going to happen. We are going to rebuild that institution. And just to show a little bit about the project, we have, one of the main points is, of course, the castle, the palace of the Museu Nacional, which is on the top. But we also have a research and teaching campus. It's an area of 43,500 square meters, and what we call our botanical garden, which, by the way, is one of the few places in the whole city of Rio de Janeiro that maintains original vegetation. And I'm absolutely sure some of you would be very interested in that. Point being, we want to make all of this available to the public. So just to show a little bit of the work that has been done inside of the museum, we were able to scan the whole building, and the idea is to recover part of the building in a historical way, but other parts in a very, how we say, contemporaneous way. So, and in that sense, we hope to be able to make a difference in all of the important matters, and I will not repeat what Rafael just pointed out, which are really very, very important to society and actually for the future of humankind. Now, the research and teaching campus, which is really one of the biggest challenges, because here we really need a lot of resources, it's actually located quite close to the park. Here you see in the Botanical Garden with the library of the Museo Nacional. And at that campus, we do have already a building of administration. So the administration building is there. We do have a place where we are actually gathering the collections that we got. And here I have to make this very public. We are very thankful for the German government who has spent 1 million euros and made this actually possible for us to get inside the palace and rescue a lot of important items. But we also have that building being constructed, and that building, which should be finished by the end of this year, are for the children that are demanding their museum back. And it's up to us to make it happen. And in that sense, what do you think is our biggest challenge? Yes, you all know, but not only finances. Our biggest challenge is collections. We had something around 20 million items, of which 12 million were insects, and we have lost 85% of that. Yes, it hurts a lot. So what are we looking forward? We are looking in order, and this is a campaign we get, and by the way, we have it in English and in Portuguese, and after, some of you, if you want, we can just look me up so we can give it to you. Rafael has it already. And what we need, we had something around 4,400 square meters of area for the exhibitions, which actually only 3,200 more or less were used. There we had 5,774 specimens. Yes, we were able to count it one by one. And what is our aim? Our aim is now to have in our new exhibit only the permanent part of roughly 5,500 square meters. And here we're looking forward to receive something around 10,000 specimens. We, of course, will have the Botanical Garden, which is very large, also open to the visitors. And also we will have places for temporary exhibits, which are not counted in those 5,500 square meters. Now, this is what we, the main points of our new exhibits, the main focuses. We will have an historical circuit, we will have a cultural diversity circuit, we will have a universe and life circuit, and environments of Brazil. And I could highlight all of them for you. I will not do it for the purpose of time, but I just want to point out that environments from Brazil is wonderful. It's one journey that starts at the museum, goes to all of the countries, southern part, northern part, Amazon, islands, comes back, where we would want to show for the public the environments and the people that live in those environments and how those environments got the way they were. And I really think that's one of the places where we would like to make some comparisons with what is happening outside of Brazil. And here's one place which I really think we all could get together and help in terms of the collections. Now, we already got some. This was the first donation that happened actually by the time COVID was getting a pandemic from the Universal Museum Ioanneum from Graz, Austria. They gave us 196 specimen ethnographic material, which was very important for us. We also got from Senckenberg Museum, and I'm sure someone is here from there, we got 1,500 beetles, some which will be in our exhibitions. We also got donations from the University of Coimbra, a very nice mollusk donation, which will help us more in the study area. But we also got from the Aroca Geopark some donations, including this very giant trilobite. You all may have noticed I'm a paleontologist, so those are very interesting for us. So it just shows that we can actually get international collaboration with these kind of items. And also, just very quickly to finish, I think it's very important, and I think that's the message that Rafael said it, and I just wanna stress that the museum needs to talk with society. And you know, Rafael, my kids are not teenagers anymore, but they deal with a lot of teenagers. It's hard to get them outside of their screen, but we must find a way how to interact with those people. They're used to these very quick things in you know, TikTok. I was just learning Facebook, and now they say there's TikTok. No way, at least not for me. But the point is the museum needs to talk with them. We need to find ways to do that. But also, on the same side, we also need to show the society that they need to value their museums. Like, for example, the Museo Nacional de Ciencias Naturales of Madrid. There has to be this message sent out. And I think the presence, Rafael, of everyone here today shows you the support. And before I completely finish, I still have a small video, which I understand that I will have to put on. Great. So we will hopefully be able to do that quite fast. Let me just see. Actually, we will. I would love to have some sound. Thank you.
Yes, so it's working. So welcome back, everyone, after the nice coffee. And now we have some more serious business. We have our first roundtable. And the topic is the international dimensions of natural history museums. I first want to thank Rafael Zardoya, director, for inviting me to be here. I used to be a fellow of the National Museum of Natural Science. I did here my PhD. But now I am Isabel Sanmartín, and I work at the Royal Botanical Garden, which is I will say, is in partnership with the museum, and I am vice director of educational outreach and communication. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce you today to this first roundtable, and the topic is this international dimension of museums. So what is that? I actually wondered about that when I got the invitation. So we all know that it has been a drive to establish networking, robust alliances and partnerships among museums and also, we say, botanical gardens. And the idea is to put the collections out there to make them public, but also to make them useful for all researchers around the world, not only in Europe. And I think our three speakers today represent very well this drive to make these international dimensions of museums. And I'm going to introduce each of them very briefly with one slide, and then I will give them the word so they can introduce themselves and their main mission. We plan a different order, so considering the sitting order here, so I will start with the ladies, with CETAF and the chair, Michelle Price, who is sitting there in the middle. And what is CETAF? CETAF is the Consortium of European Taxonomic Facilities. And I'm very proud to say that is the oldest, let's say, international efforts to join museums and botanical gardens starting in 1996. And it's a network of taxonomic research institutions around Europe. I think we represent now 21 countries, and there are 5,000 researchers. And it's more important because of the era of exploration. In European museums and botanical gardens, we have up to 80% of the described specimens described biodiversity. And many of them are very important historical, importance. So CETAF has as the main mission to facilitate access to European collections, promote research on taxonomy and systematic biology, a very important mission nowadays, as we all know, and to foster cooperation and partnerships among all these museums and gardens, and very important, this fourth mission, to train a new generation of taxonomists with this distributed European School of Taxonomy, which organizes very popular workshops and courses. And okay, so to the right, to the far right, we have DiSSCo, Professor Edwin van Huis, who is director of the Naturalist Biodiversity Center, and he's here representing DiSSCo. He's the chair of DiSSCo, Distributed System of Scientific Collections. And DiSSCo is a European research infrastructure for natural science collections, and I can say that it's the largest ever agreement or investment in an agreement to join, to grow together efforts among different collections in European and even in international museums. And the idea, as I said here, the mission is to create one single European unified collection that can be accessible digitally, to promote common curatorial practices, policies, and standards that help us to share collections, and also to ensure that the data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And I will say I wanted to put in this slide synthesis because I do work on the Synthesis Plus project, which I will say that it was the first offshot or DiSSCo or pre-shot. And we are very happy to collaborate with DiSSCo in all these different missions. And on the left is Professor Harry Lewin, who is professor at the University of California, Davis, and he's here as the chair of the Earth BioGenome Project Working Group. And he has this very nice motto, sequencing life for the future of life. But I really like Harry's own motto, which is for the BioGenome moonshot. So it's our own moonshot, or our trying to get to the moon by sequencing the genome of every single species on Earth. And that's a very important and large mission, because we all know that there are around 2 million species described, but there are up to maybe 50 million species awaiting discovery and description. And the BioGenome project will make use of these advances and tools that we have in genomics, which have become less costly. And by sequencing genomes, we do contribute to biodiversity conservation, understanding relationship between organisms and environment, but also we try to create new benefits for the society and the human welfare, for example, biodrugs or biocombustible or different biomaterials. So it has, we will discuss that later about funding. And finishing, what is the main, maybe the main theme that may join for different roundtables today? And I will say that we are all here together to combat biodiversity loss. And I wanted to have this picture or slide here that was prepared by the students in the master course we have at the Botanical Garden and the museum, representing all the species we lost over the last 2 centuries. And the main, I will say, the main objective of all these international organizations, European efforts, are at the end to stop, or at least slow down biodiversity loss and what we call the 6th extinction. And I think we will hear about that a lot during the different roundtables today and tomorrow. And without further ado, I give the word to our speakers today, and I think I will start with you. Okay. Oh, I was reminded that I need to do like this and show. There. So, yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, thanks Isabel. A little bit difficult sitting down and to give your talk. I'd rather be Alex and moving around and having some slides, but thank you for the introduction. Isabel, thank you. Rafa, and congratulations on the 250th anniversary of this museum. I'm not a museum director, as mentioned, but I am a co-founder and presently the chair of the International Working Group for the Earth BioGenome Project, which, as Isabel mentioned, has the mildly ambitious goal of sequencing not all of life, but at least the eukaryotic tree, of the tree of life, about 1.8 million identified organisms in all. And so I'm not a museum director, but if you think about the end point, which is trying to do these 1.8 million species in 10 years, which is why it's framed as a grand challenge and a moonshot for biology, the end point is a digital repository of life on Earth. The sequences, it is a collection, and it will be the foundation, the roadmap, the foundation for the future of biology, study of evolution, the origins of life. And so it is very connected to what the museums do around the world. And in fact, the museums have played a critical role in the Earth BioGenome Project. And by making the collections accessible for sequencing, and by organizing new collections, because much of what's, unfortunately in the collections around the world, you can't get high quality DNA for creating reference genomes. And so a few of the big museums around the world, Smithsonian, you'll hear from Kirk, and other museum directors have biodiversity collections, which include new collections and storing samples in liquid nitrogen such that high molecular weight, high quality DNA can be extracted for sequencing. And if you look at programs like the Darwin Tree of Life program in the UK, they're intimately coordinated. This is a project that's funded by the Wellcome Trust. It's already more than 50 million euros invested in this project, and half the money is going to the collection side, to the museums, and for proper identification, classification, vouchering, and storage of specimens that can later be shipped to the sequencing facilities for processing, for extraction of high molecular weight DNA, and then sequencing and assembly by big sequencing centers such as the Sanger Center in England, our center at UC Davis, the Rockefeller, and other places that are set up for high throughput sequencing. And so the museums have a central role to play in this, and where there have been resources provided, they've been really key players, and where there's planning involved, and everybody's not just trying to say, okay, now we have the collections, but we don't make the collection accessible to others, we make it to our friends. It's really a global coordination. This is what the Earth BioGenome Project is doing. It's globally coordinating sequencing to reduce overlap, to provide standards for the entire world for extraction, vouchering of specimens, for sequencing, assembly, annotation, and analysis, basic analysis of what we should do with every genome. So at the end, we don't have to do it again. It's important. We want to do it once. We want to do it right. We want chromosome scale assemblies of everything. And we can have a long discussion about why we should sequence everything. I'm happy to do that over beers or wine or gin or whatever you like to drink, or here even as questions. But it is important that we do everything. Sequencing everything is why we're here. And we're not going to back away from that goal as an international community. And your goal is collecting everything. And so there's a natural place for us to meet. So I want to close with a question. What will the museum be in another 50 years, right? With extinction rates 100 to 1,000-fold above background rates, as determined by the fossil records. The paleontologists, great preeminent paleontologists in the room know this very well. 100 to 1,000-fold above the background rates. In 50 years, we may lose, the estimates could be, 500,000 species by the end of the century, maybe 100, half a million species, maybe by the end of the century. So in another 50 years, if we're not doing this collection, we can't go back and collect DNA from extinct organisms very easily. But just look at the importance. This year, right, a Nobel Prize was given for ancient DNA. Look at the importance. What did we learn? It's not just the human, the fossils and the bones. This is connecting evolutionary history, understanding our origins. Svante Pääbo, right, won the Nobel Prize for ancient DNA, and we all carry some of this DNA in our own genomes. Now amplify that by 1.8 million, right, species. And ponder that. You can now do that for less than the cost of the original sequencing of the human genome. All 1.8 can be sequenced and assembled for less than the cost of the human genome. The sequencers are the equivalent of the Hubble telescope. Okay? The Hubble telescope, the origins and the evolution of the universe. For us, origins and evolution come from the DNA sequencing, which is coming from the sequences. The sequences are the equivalent of the Hubble telescope for us. And we need to start thinking much bigger, and we're so worried about budgets keeping our institutions open, and we don't realize the value. This project, like the Earth BioGenome Project, which connects natural history, which connects all the museums and connects the field biologists and the geneticists and the conservationists. It's the greatest bargain in the history of biology, okay? I will say that. For $4.7 billion over 10 years, nothing will have greater value to humanity than knowing the sequence of all eukaryotes. So I will stop with that and turn it over to Michelle.
Yes.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
So it's
You're welcome.
Michelle from CETAF.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm really delighted to be here. So I have a different perspective in a sense. I am passionate about collections, and I've always been passionate about collections, and that's how I ended up in CETAF. So CETAF is the Consortium of European Taxonomic. So the DiSSCo was introduced previously. It's really a community and a family created around museums, botanical gardens and science centres that house collections and do research on collections. So CETAF, as it's already been said, was created in 1996, and it's evolved over time. It started with 10 of the largest institutions in Europe who are still members, and it's grown over time. It became a legal body in 2011, and then as a legal body, of course, had more impact and gained more potentiality to actually speak with one voice for taxonomy and systematics in Europe. And that's what's really happened right now. So CETAF provides a forum for discussion. We all have similar problems in different languages, in different cultures, but we all have very, very, very finally problems linked to collection management, to taxonomy training, how to address these problems as a community. And I always say that CETAF is always larger than the sum of its parts. So by working together, collaborating, discussing, finding solutions, searching for money, developing partnerships, developing initiatives, we are all stronger. So CETAF itself is the community. It's gone from 10 of the large institutions. Now we don't really want to have a size grade of everybody. And now we have 71 members from 21 European countries. So 71 institutions that are members of the CETAF community. And again, that means that we all get together twice a year to really meet and discuss the different issues. At the moment, we have very active setup of working groups, so working groups that are developed for specific tasks or specific issues. They can be of long duration, so the collections management group, for example. We have taxonomy publishing that's related to the European Journal of Taxonomy, which is a diamond access journal for publicity. We have some of the ancient members of the EJT here. We also have a training network, DEST, which has been mentioned several times, the Distributed European School of Taxonomy. Shall I try again? Sorry, I'm a bit fuzzy. So the training school is also built from the community, so people contribute courses, and it's developed and centralized through... I can't sing, so please, I will not be singing during this presentation. We also have different sorts of groups that are dealing with specific topics, and we work with digitization. Digitization, of course, now moved into DiSSCo. Collections management, we have all of the different things that are related to community functioning. We've also just launched a successful proposal that's called Tetris, which is taxonomy training capacity building. That's starting recently, which again has links with the digitization, but also with the taxonomy training. So what's happened again with CETAF is it's become a leader within Europe. So we have close relationships with the European Commission, the European Parliament, and get consulted on different things that are happening within Europe. So we really are now speaking with one voice for the community within Europe. And in a sense, it's a good model that ties in with this genome because there's cross-cutting collaboration, communication, community-driven input. And of course, we're going to house the vouchers, so we need to know that they're coming. We're often holding the collectors, and we're holding the taxonomists that are able to determine the material from a non-genetic perspective. So there's lots of collaboration. And I think my message really here is collaboration, communication, and working together for a common vision is really the way forward. And I think we're doing that with the community. I think we have lots of very positive things going on right now. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that I would like to say is we need to turn the message into nature positive. I think we have a tendency to kind of think everything is dire and everything is terrible. We are in a complicated situation, but we need to change our message. We need to become nature positive. And we need to become museum positive to really turn our message into something that's proactive and that's positive, because we hold so much data and so much information and so many skills and so many dedicated, passionate people that we need to drive our message forward, and we need to slightly change what we're saying. So with that, I can pass, I don't know whether you need the microphone, but I can keep it here. Yeah. So thank you.
Because it will become an ERIC, so which is a European organization, but we are very far in the prepare phase, and we're just about ready to start. And DiSSCo came from CETAF, actually. I mean, CETAF is the organization that binds us all in Europe, so all the institutions. And from those discussions, the ideas of building an infrastructure, a digital infrastructure for our collection information came forth. And that has been very powerful, has been very, very successful in the sense that so many institutes are now part of this endeavor, about 170 in 23 countries, so it's really starting to move. And to get an idea what DiSSCo is really a technical digital infrastructure. So that doesn't sound very sexy, does it? And it's not. It's really just work. It's work to enable us all in Europe to share our collections digitally. But it's not only about collections, it's about all the information around collections. So we have physical objects in our collection, but there's also all this information like genetic information, genomes or barcodes, there is geospatial information, there is literature, there is all this information tied around these objects. And what DiSSCo tries to do on one hand is to build an infrastructure that can contain all that information and make it one big science infrastructure, because that's what we're doing it all for. We're all working hard for our scientists, and of course, hopefully also for policymakers who are going to use all the information that we can give them. Now, on the other side, there is the internet, the web, and to be able to build this infrastructure and this big collection of information tied to species and physical objects, you also have to make sure that the way that the information moves around freely and fair, as Hera said. So that's something else, because the internet, although it has been around for quite some time, struggles with letting all that information flow easily, especially when it's big numbers or different kinds of digital information. So the other thing that DiSSCo does is try to make, by building protocols, by using protocols, by agreeing on using the same protocols to make the internet for us, for our scientists, easy to maneuver. And actually right this week there will be a Fair Digital Objects conference in Leiden in the Netherlands, which talks just about that, how we're going to make the internet usable for scientists in a way that information doesn't get corrupted, but that we can get access to everything that is in our vaults and in our databases. So that's generally what DiSSCo does. And I think the interesting thing that you see here around this table is that everybody is doing something different, but it's all geared towards the same goal. I think Harris explained that goal very, very well. I think we all feel that. So we have the genome people working on full genomes and on barcodes. We've got technical people working on the infrastructure. We've got natural history collections trying to get all these collections together and make them available. We have the countries who put a lot of money into digitization of these collections. So we kind of have this little ecosystem here around the table that is starting to function, I would say.
Thank you. So thanks to Harris, Michelle, and Edwin for this very nice introduction. Oh, yes. Because I think it's much nicer to hear the experts or the people out there working on these international efforts than to see my summary slides, dry summary slides. But I've been commissioned by Rafa to ask some questions, and I will say that these questions in the roundtable come from my own experience in synthesis. I've been part of synthesis in the different installments since 2006, I think, and also from colleagues who maybe are not so familiar with these, as I say, international efforts and want to know more about that. So some questions may come a bit like, not polemic, but at least maybe challenging. But I would think it's nice to have this curiosity and to clarify some aspects on. And I try to make it like, not random, but at least to have questions that everyone can answer, and you are free to, if not to interrupt, but to add to the response if you want. So my first questions actually is for Harris for the Earth BioGenome project. I think you really summarized it very well. What are the main mission and the benefits of this? I was reading the original release in Proceedings of National Academy of Science, and one thing that occurred to me is that in that publication, the Earth BioGenome project, the justification was mainly in terms of applicability, so fuel or biodrugs, and there was this nice table listing all those. So my question is, aside from that, which is very clear, what can the Earth BioGenome project contribute to biodiversity conservation, to the idea of documenting diversity and knowing how speciation takes place, what are the processes involved? Because if you only, and I know you were going to answer that, if you only sequence one individual from each species, a genome from each species of eukaryotes, how can you actually contribute compared to other efforts that tackle larger number of specimens?
Yeah. How do I do that in 2-minute answer?
And in 10 years.
And in 10 years for everything else. Yeah, well, there's another paper in PNAS in the last issue, the 10-paper compendium of papers published in January of 2022, earlier in the year. There is a full paper by Mark Blackster as the first author, who's the director of the Darwin Tree of Life program, which has the title, Why Sequence Them All? And it's not just justified in terms of the applications in bioeconomy. It's framed very much, the major scientific issues are framed there. And often we get asked the question, well, okay, if you sequence them all, why do you need to spend 5 times or 10 times or 100 times as much to get a reference quality genome? Can't you just do it with small fragments and so on? And the community has decided that we must have reference quality genomes, at least at the family level. And now, with the technology becoming much more accessible and the genomes becoming cheaper, we're really considering doing reference quality genomes at the genus level. You know, for people out there who are not genomicists, you know, it's like trying to understand the natural history of an elephant, right? And you don't have the head or something like this. I mean, you need to have the complete genome sequence to do evolution. I will give you one example, which is chromosome evolution, right? Which is my own personal area. We could not do these studies of understanding what the ancestral genomes were. You're asking about basic scientific questions, without having reference quality genomes from each of the orders, or in this case, we used all the mammalian orders. And it was not possible to do that, to have a detailed sequence-based reconstruction of what the mammalian ants, common ancestor of all mammals was without having these reference genomes. And so for conservation, so that's just one example. In conservation, there's a big gap between conservation biologists and genomicists, but now the conservationists are all coming around to the view that they do need a reference genome. They need it for the alignment of their short reads from the populations, determining what the genetic variation is in each of the populations that they're studying, so they can look at adaptation, speciation, introgression, and so on. Just natural history of populations is very much dependent on at least having one reference genome for the species that you're interested in studying.
Yes.
Yeah?
And, but also maybe alongside these technical advances in genomics, you have the analytical advances. And I heard that even with one genome, or at least for one population, with one single specimen, you can even know or infer the history of the population from the multiple genes in one genome.
Yeah, it's getting there. And one genome is not one genome from an individual, it's two genomes, right? There's a maternal genome and a paternal genome, and now you can reconstruct both. And all of our reference genomes have two genomes actually assembling. There's a primary and a secondary. And we can then tell all the regions that share between the two genomes, so the homozygosity. And that is very much heterozygosity, and runs of homozygosity tell us a lot about inbreeding of that individual. Okay, the longer the stretches of homozygosity, that correlates with inbreeding. Inbreeding, of course, correlates with other issues related to species health and population health. And so the conservation biologists are now using these data. There is a correlation between IUCN status and heterozygosity and homozygosity, although others are telling me that correlation is not that strong outside of the vertebrates. So we need to look into that much more deeply, but a single individual, yes, can give you a lot of information about the status of genetic diversity of an existing species, and that from which that was the population from which it was drawn.
And have you taken into account the genome size, because it's so different across all the different phyla, and for example in plants with octoploids, or as you commented before, the mistletoe has a huge
100 gigabases, 30 times the size of the human genome, the mistletoe. I mean, and there are examples out there that are just unbelievably, genomes can be very complex things, right? So we're learning. We don't have all the technology yet to account for the ploidy issues, and we don't have the technology yet to account for these well, we do now, I should say. We just have acquired the technology to do an assembly of something like a mistletoe. I was at Sanger last week, and I saw an assembly with correct number of chromosomes for 100 gigabase genome. That's 100 billion bases, and they were able to resolve it into the chromosomes of that species. There are chromosomes of the mistletoe that are bigger than the whole human genome, if you can imagine. And it's a lot of repetitive, a very complex, repeats that don't contain genes, and it's very difficult to do it, but we now can do it, and it's possible.
So you count on that with your funding, because I guess the funding is like fixed close, and you can have surprises about the genome size and
we average
single
it.
Species you create.
Yeah, well, we averaged it. When we did the cost, we said the average genome size would be about 2 gigabases. And so there are some really small things. There are yeasts that have 10 million bases, and there are mistletoe that have 100 billion bases, and they're eukaryotes. And they basically have the same number of genes, which is just absolutely mind-blowing, right? So we have an estimate and a range, but we need to go taxon by taxon and get much more specific about costs. And so Darwin's strategy is, let's do the easier stuff, the smaller stuff. We now show that we can do a mistletoe, so it's possible. It costs a lot of money to do a plant or a genome that is that large, but it is possible to do, and if you have a reason to do it, it'll get done.
Yes, I fully agree with that one. I think my question now is for both you and Edwin, because I know you are here and representing DiSSCo, but you, in Naturalis, you also have this genomics, genomics project. So what is the link between that project, that is the European hub, and the Earth BioGenome project? Because sometimes we see that there are these international initiatives, and then we have the European initiative or network. So what would be the relationship, on how we avoid redundancy of that?
Well, you know, there's so much work to do. I mean, we won't be getting in each other's way for 20 or 30 years. So what we see in the European project, that it is piloting this kind of work, this genome work, because, like Hera said, you need longer pieces of the genome, or the full genome, to get a grip on, say, taxa and families and all that. So in the same project, you also see the barcoding. We will, especially when we start using environmental DNA, we will find a lot of traces of genomes in the soil, in the water, or whatever, that we need to trace back to species. And to do so, it's easy if you already have found that species. But we will find thousands of species that we've never seen before. So to get an idea of where they belong, you need the kind of information that the full genome projects are delivering. So it's different. I mean, the goal is different. And if you want to go out in the field with a little machine that can pick up DNA, you're not going to look for the full genome. That's not going to work. But if you want answers in different domains, you do. So it's connected.
So, oh yes, please, go ahead.
So the Earth BioGenome Project is an international network of networks, right? So it's a network of networks, and we have 50 affiliated projects. Earth BioGenome Project doesn't own a DNA sequencer, right? It's a group of volunteers who have come together with a common purpose of trying to sequence all eukaryotes in 10 years. And this is completely dependent on infrastructures that are partially in place or going to be in place. And those networks, such as the ones that are being discussed here, the metadata that goes with every sequence. I mean, he views the sequence as metadata. We view the digital information as critical information that goes with the sequence. And so all of this, again, will come together and has to be coordinated. And it would be wonderful if the species that you have the picture of that's vouchered is also, and identified through DNA barcoding, is also the one that you have sequenced. Right. And if you can get to that level of coordination, the value keeps growing for that.
Mm-hmm. So I've been told that we have actually very little time. Somehow time flies by. But I want to go back to, one of the important things is collections, Michelle. So one question you need to, yes. I think is, yes. So the question is, how do you do it? How do you coordinate all these different museums, botanical gardens? They all have their own idiosyncrasies. They have their own collections, uniqueness. They want to keep their collections for themselves. And how do you do to create this hub so that everything is shared? Because that's something that comes about a lot.
Yeah, again, this is a delicate question. You could answer it many different ways, but I would say the real thing about CETAF is creating a community spirit, because we need to be a family, or we need to be friends, we need to be on the same page, we need to be going in the same direction. So we have a strategy, so we've worked on a common strategy for the museums. Obviously, digitization is now more moving off towards DiSSCo. But we have the collections management part, the research part, and then all of the other types of communication and outreach part. So really, CETAF, the community that's built under CETAF, is basically really, really formed around a long, long history of collaboration and a long history of cooperation and a long history of sharing a vision. So we really are wanting to move all together in the same direction. There are some large institutions here, and they really have a strong role to play in helping the medium-sized and the small institutions. So it's also very dependent on the large institutions to give a helping hand to the community in moving forwards. And we have very good examples of how some of the larger institutions are running working groups, they're helping with their understanding, they're helping in making proposals. Synthesis has run out of London, that came out of ideas that were had in CETAF many years ago. So all of those things are really the community spirit. And once we start communicating and we start cooperating, as we said before, we understand we all have similar problems. We have our political systems, we have our finances, our currencies, we have budget cuts, we have issues that we all need to deal with. But if we can share and discuss and communicate on these, we are much stronger together. And once we form a critical mass, we also become a lobbying voice and a consultation voice. So CETAF has a role in many different areas across the European Union. We have the Code of Conduct for the Nagoya and the implementation of Nagoya, and CETAF is on the ABS Consultation Forum. We have a role in all of the different sort of bodies. We have a role in GBIF, we have a seat on the DiSSCo board. So we're very present in very many different areas. Of course, and no one institution can do all of that. But because we share the time and the resources and the different tasks are shared in the community, we can actually be in many more places than any one institution can be alone. And this is really the strength. So again, we are stronger together. We are more than some of our parts if we communicate and collaborate. And this is what we see now with the globalization in the sense of our aims and our ambitions. We have the European DiSSCo and CETAF relationship, the development of this concurrently. And now we have also international collaborations with big ambitions where we all find our place and we all fit in. We also have links with GBIF. So GBIF is aggregating biodiversity data. This is going to be related to DiSSCo and the Genome Project and also the collections. And we're all now discussing, and I think this is a very exciting time for us, and we shouldn't underestimate the power of communication and the power of having a common vision. And this is really why it's so exciting to all come together and we can share our passion for the collections, we can share our passion for the reasons we ever got interested in collections in the first place, and we can move the community together, locally, regionally, European scale, and globally. And this is really, really key. Having the dialogues that count, having the common vision, having the common goals, and finding the place for everybody to fit. Exactly like you were saying, Edwin, as well. Everyone has their place, and because we're now communicating, we're moving forward together. And I think this is really the strength of having the networking organizations that develop the hubs and the communication possibilities that then can reach out. And again, no one institution can ever do all of this on their own. So some institutions, my institution contributes my in-kind time to run CETAF. Other institutions contribute other things in kind to running CETAF again. We have a relatively low budget compared to other things, but we're very successful because of the dedication and the time that people give into the community to get things back. So again, I'm saying strong community, shared vision, common goals, discussion, nature positive, museum positive, and we have so much to do together as a community. It's a very exciting time. I've probably ran through the time, so I'll end there.
One more? Okay. So that was a very nice summary on the power of many or the power of all, as you summarized very well. So next question is, we know that we are, for the three of you, and maybe for Michelle and Edwin, so what is we know that it's relevant for biodiversity conservation, but what is the relevance of our collections for the current challenges in terms of the present problems in our society? And I'm thinking of the pandemic, on the COVID, and I just read, and I didn't know about that both CETAF and DiSSCo, they have a common initiative that was called CETAF DiSSCo COVID initiative. So what do collections that look or sound very dry, all specimens, what can they say or inform or help when we face these very urgent challenges like COVID?
Do you want me to take that one?
Take that one. Yeah.
All right. So the value of collections, I think we all don't underestimate that. They can be underestimated by other people, but we know there's the physical object, there is the data inside, structural data, chemical data, genetic data. We have extended specimens, we add a digitized identifier, and we can link everything. So the value is really there. But there's also a value in having the competencies to actually document and describe taxa, either using the physical objects and also linking that to the genetic data. So having the vouchers linked, a physical specimen with a barcode or a genome sequence, this is highly valuable and highly appropriate for tackling challenges. I would like to say, I don't think that museums necessarily do tackle the challenges, but what museums do is produce the information, the taxonomic names, the species concepts, the revision of everything that then contributes further up. Without a species name, without a taxonomic concept, trying to understand biodiversity doesn't make any sense. You have to have that. And now we can link it to barcodes and genomes, which gives us a very, very powerful tool. The collections are also time series, so we can hop back in time and find out what's going along or what's happened to a certain taxon. The records are not complete in any one individual institution, but when we all pull together, we have a really, really strong record of life and the evolution of life on Earth. So I would say what we need to do as a community is we need to position strongly to put taxonomy at the center of the biodiversity crisis, to understand what's happening in relationship to barcodes, to genomes. The documentation and the description and the understanding of life on Earth is constantly evolving. And those of you who are taxonomists, you often hear the criticism, but the name changed. And of course it changed because our understanding evolves, and we have to be able to communicate also that taxonomy and systematics is a dynamic, scientific, hypothesis-driven field where we're testing concepts constantly, and there is change, and change is okay. Change is normal, in fact. If we didn't change, something would be seriously wrong. And I think with the DNA and the genomes, we're going to end up getting much more clarification of the tree of life. And at that point, as you were saying before, we have a really powerful tool to respond to these climatic changes, the problems, the Anthropocene, the extinctions. I don't think we necessarily will solve them ourselves, but we're part of a collaborative network, and the museums, the institutions provide key data in answering these questions. So I said I wouldn't want to say that we solve everything, but we provide some groundwork and some essential information in the history.
Yes, I think
Okay.
Harris wants to say.
I'll give two examples that I think are relevant to this. First, when you collect an organism in the wild and you sequence it, either if you use a tissue sample or you will find almost in at least half the cases that there are genomes there that aren't the genome of the organism that you're sequencing. You discover viruses, you discover bacteria associated with that organism, symbionts, and this is a moment of discovery. Thousands of viruses have already been discovered from just sequencing an organism and finding stuff that doesn't belong in the genome. It's clearly a viral genome. And so this whole our project, the Earth Biogenome Project, plays an incredibly important role in biosurveillance, because every organism that you sequence, a lot of other organisms come along and viruses come along with it. So it's already proving quite critical in that regard. Another example it was very recent. It happened to be one from my group during the pandemic. We said, what can we do with all these genomes that we're collecting? And once the receptor for SARS-CoV-2 was known, and this is called the ACE2 receptor, for those of you who know a little something about biology. After a group meeting, I just went to the database. It's a collection, right? So you view the sequences, the NCBI. It is a collection. It's a collection of sequences. And we found 415 vertebrate species which had ACE2 receptor genes there. And so we then teamed up with modelers, and we used our capacity for evolutionary analysis, and we looked at the ACE2 receptors across all of these 415 vertebrate species, and we made predictions about which species would be likely to bind the spike protein of the SARS-CoV-2 on the basis of the structure of the ACE2 and the binding sites, the receptor binding domain within these molecules which interact directly with the viral spike protein. So there are 25 amino acids which are absolutely critical to this, and we did the structural modeling, and we looked across all these species, and the predictions were kind of, people said, oh, that's not going to be possible. Of course, all of the old world primates had identity at the 25 amino acids that were critical to binding of the spike. Within weeks, the first gorilla at the San Diego Zoo, which became infected, so we could check that one off the list. Not a great, you say, well, the primates, they're going to be the most susceptible. They're going to have a receptor that's most like human. But then the zoos all began to implement very strict programs on the basis of the recommendations we made for primates. But they were also in the high-risk category, Syrian hamster, white-tailed deer. Anybody know the white-tailed deer story? It's a white-tail, that's a ruminant, man. That's quite far. That's the Loraisatherians, and that's different from where the human branch of the eukaryotic tree of life, people said, oh, that's just by chance. Well, the biggest reservoir for SARS-CoV-2 now in North America is white-tailed deer. And it was, it was quite apparent from the sequence to us that this was a high-risk species, and it took a year and a half to find it, but it was there. China is using the information from these predictions to look for the intermediate host. We still don't know if the virus jumped from a bat directly to human or went through another intermediate host, and they're using these ranked lists to try and identify intermediate hosts. So your question about pandemics, a collection of sequences linked to ecology, natural history of the organisms, where they live, who they interact with. The ecology is critical, so getting all the metadata is absolutely essential. This is critical information for really pandemic identification of potential and pandemic agents and control.
Yes. Yeah, I think you both, and Michelle and Harris, you touched two very important topics, which is biodiscovery, collections as repositories, waiting for us for the findings to be done on there. How many of us have found out that the type doesn't correspond to what I thought it was the species? And the other one is the idea of increasing the value of our collections. Both of you gave some thoughts about that. And that's my next question, and I think it's about both for you, Michelle, and Edwin, in DiSSCo and CETAF. So the digital growth. There has been, after the pandemic, there has been an acceleration in the drive to go digital, digitize our collections, make them available to everyone online. And of course, I always get these questions among curators and collection managers, or isn't it too much investment in digitizing the collections and too little, I know this is polemic, and too little on the physical collections, like purchasing cabinets or the fire alarm for that. And I can see that in synthesis, there is a drive, and I'm part of synthesis, so I understand that. But what are your thoughts? How do you answer to those questions from by curators?
Well, of course, the answer is always yes. I mean, there's too little money for collection management, and there's not enough money for digitization. But I think one of the reasons for DiSSCo is that all the scientists saw that they had to do so much traveling from collection to actually see and study the objects that they needed to see. And that not only takes time, but that takes money too. So building a digital collection is, at least for part of the research, maybe not for all the research, but for part of the research, it's going to be very, very helpful. And I think the most important part of that is that it will bring all these collections together. Now, the thing with naturalistic collections is that the bigger is better, which doesn't always sound nice, but it's very true. because it makes it possible for scientists to actually understand everything that goes in different families, taxons, etc. Now, building a one-world collection, I think, something that we all would like to see. So you can only do it in the digital realm. You have to do it together. You have to invest in digitization. And actually, I have not heard any scientists in our institute saying no to digitization. I mean, everybody acknowledges it. The only thing is that if you run out of cabinets or alcohol, then you're frustrated as well.
Yes. So I wanted to bring the Guggenheim Museum and global history. You know that they try to make global museum and build different museums in different parts of the world. And there was a critique against that. The global museum at the end is, decreasing the uniqueness of every museum, making it global. At the end, a critique against the losing what is unique for a museum. So, but the way you say, Edwin, is more like it's the opposite. You want to build a larger museum. At the end, joining forces, yes, we will.
I also think that, I mean, the museum experience can be very national, regional, or even city-oriented. That's fine. What we're talking about is the science, and a science that is essential for everyone on this planet. So that needs to be one big scientific community working on what is probably the biggest challenge ahead. Yeah. So yeah, but I love the very small, very specific museums with their own atmosphere and their own collections, and there's no doubt about it. But I think that's a different discussion.
You want? Yes. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think the issue. So the issue we're having is really we are a global museum already. Mm-hmm. We just need to position, behave like one. So we don't need to remake the wheel that already exists. We just need to connect the pieces that are running the wheel. And this is one of the challenges that we face is that cross-continent. We've done cross-borders in Europe, but we need to go cross-borders outside and connect with other people and really create the notion of the one world collection. Because we really are a distributed museum. All of our collections are linked. We have duplicates from voyages from other people. So there's no one institution. Each institution has a unique collection, but the collections are also shared. So this is when we need to just really behave like one world collection, and big and small, different languages, different cultures, and try and really move forward like that. So for me, I don't think we need to recreate. I can see the criticism in recreating something that in a sense exists. And I think I'd like to also stress the science part of it, because a lot of people think about museums as just the exhibitions. But the exhibitions is a tiny fragment that we put forward for outreach and communication and education. It's extremely important. But it's extremely important that these are connected to real science in the sense of proper taxonomic, systematic research that goes on behind the scenes, or on communities, on ecology, or on anything that happens behind the scenes with your researchers, with your collections. Because an exhibition that's not interpreted for the public has much less value than something that's interpreted by scientists to communicate on what we do. So I think the museums, we have to also, the museum is a what do you say in French, a vitrine, so it's the window dressing of what we do behind. We have to make, the exhibitions need to be excellent, but the science behind also needs to be excellent. And having the platform like DiSSCo, which will become functional relatively soon, and also the genome and the DNA barcoding initiatives, all create layers in the puzzle that we're trying to solve. So I think this is a very important view as well. We already are a world museum. We just have to kind of more communication.
Yes, I do fully agree. I mean, I work on the African flora, and the idea I don't need to travel to all the different botanical gardens, but I can access all those, even historical collections, digital collections. It's fantastic. And that's the last question. I guess it's for you, Harris, but also for DiSSCo and CETAF, and it has to do with collections and DNA. So there is this new initiative at the Natural History Museum in London. I think it's in partnership with the Kew Botanical Gardens. And they want to sequence the genome or 1,500 specimens, historical specimens, some going back to Captain Cook in the Endeavour. And the idea is learning about domestication. And the question is again the same. Sometimes there is certain reluctance to let those historical specimens to be genome sequenced because they will be lost. What will be your argument for us working at botanical gardens and museums about what is it important actually to get the genetic repositories or pools?
Yeah, so this is accessibility broadly is the question, I think. Accessibility of the collections to others for other purposes. It's always this question, I think. And in the genome area, it's been a difficult problem. There's an organization called GGBN, which is the Global Genome Biodiversity Network. And that is a network that ties together many different collections. But it's really a discoverable database, right? It just says where things are. But if you go and you try and access those samples, it may not be possible because of Nagoya and import restrictions. If it's from a rare and endangered species, you have so many issues about export and control, and these issues have not been solved. And so for our project, developing communities across the world that can do the work in their own countries, capacity building, has been absolutely critical. And the project, it will only succeed because biodiversity is not something that only exists in the UK or the US or in Spain. You have to be able to access everything everywhere. And there are countries that won't share unless they have certain guarantees. And so the accessibility is important. Now for older, specimens where you can get some information, it is possible now to, it's time. My time's up. Okay, I get it. Just to finish that point, there are many questions you can answer actually from dried specimens. The reads are very short, but if you have a focused question, that we're doing better and better about getting longer and longer reads from old specimens. The technology is actually improving, and that is critical to understanding evolutionary history, clarifying certain issues of taxonomy and clarification of, well, just a broad host of things. That's why the museum wants to do 1,500 specimens, because they're going to clarify some very important issues. So I'd like to see that work continue. We did not include it, ancient DNA, in the Earth Biogenome Project. We did include threatened and endangered species. At that time, 30,000. Today, it's 47,000. So the numbers have gone up, but sequencing costs have gone down. So it's the total cost is about the same. But we should have included it and had the foresight to think about how the existing collections can better inform some of the questions that we have today. And there are people in our organization who are very interested in using the collections. The question is accessibility, how to make these really, really accessible to the scientific community for study. And I think that turns out to be a very local question in many cases, and not easily solved.
Thank you. You actually touched a very important theme, Nagoya Protocol, but we don't have time. So I think it will be for the next roundtable. So with this, I thank the three speakers, Professor Harry Lewin, and Dr. Michelle Price, and Professor Edwin van Huis, and for being here and giving us such a nice introduction and also explaining what they are doing and why it's so important, and international dimension of museums. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. questions from the out? We don't do questions from outside.
No, I think
no time.
I think there is no time. Somehow we spent the whole hour.
We have a lot of
We
long
have a lot of
answers.
yes.
It's okay.
No, it was okay. I think it wasn't that long.
Because people will be here, and it's
Yes.
a small group, so.